What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Flatcap here, back with another The Evil Within video, except today it is not going to be gameplay. No, it is going to be a review and a discussion. So if you guys have seen my series, I really thank you for checking it out. It means a lot to me. You can see the color of this is all different now and shit like that, but fuck. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of dissect the story, and we'll do it through looking at these character models and the descriptions as well as our archive, because I feel like a lot of people didn't give this game the credit it deserved as far as the story is concerned. Now, that might be because I admit it is a little bit difficult to follow at times, but essentially what you have is this. This is the main character, Sebastian Castellanos. Apparently he weighs 174 pounds of pure beef muscle. But he's a detective, and he gets called in to a murder scene along with his partner Joseph, this strange-looking man right here who really loves writing in his notebook, and Julie Kidman. Now, these three together form the primary protagonists throughout the game. But as you quickly come to realize, and they do get separated really early on, what you quickly come to realize is that Kidman is not all that she seems. So as you can see right here, it says, Kidman has a little recollection of or interest in her past. Her only concern is what she has to do now and what will happen if she fails. Essentially, upon arriving at the mental institution and being separated, Kidman is left outside. Joseph and Sebastian are basically incepted into the mind of this deranged serial killer and scientist called Ruvik. Now, Ruvik is formerly known as Ruben Victoriano, the son of Laura and Marcelo Victoriano. Oh, I'm sorry, no. Laura and... what is his dad's name, actually? I don't remember. Nah, that's no good. I don't remember. Anyway, the son of his mom and his dad, obviously, and he, from a very early age, is kind of odd, and throughout the game, you get these flashbacks of him performing experiments on small animals. He's dissecting them. The only person who really seems to understand him is his sister, Laura, and here's Laura right now. She, wears red. She's creepy as fuck. I like how the character models do move, though, or at least the hair moves. And she and Ruben are actually greatly injured. She dies, and Ruben is greatly scarred by a fire that is set to his family's land when they are playing in this barn. Essentially, the locals are upset that they bought all the land up and think they can do whatever they want because they're rich. So she's burned and killed. At this point, Ruben, who will come to be known as Ruvik, here's him all burned up. He is stored in his basement. His dad is ashamed of him. His mom is quite sick, and so they hide him away in a basement where he continues to pursue the medical experiments on all human brains in order to try to link two consciousnesses together. That is his primary project. In doing so, he comes into contact with this guy right here, Marcelo Jimenez, and he actually is also seemingly in the game a protagonist. At first look at my nose trench coat as its ways, and he is working with a patient named Leslie when you first encounter him. But what you learn is that he actually helped Ruvik, or Ruben, initially with his skin condition and his burns, and that is how those two interacted. In exchange for generous donations from the wealthy Victoriano family, Marcelo Jimenez would bring mental patients, and I mean, maybe dead, maybe alive, we're not really sure, to Ruben's underground laboratory where he would perform more experiments on them. Eventually, Ruben stopped giving them funding, and he stopped receiving patients from him. It's at this point, I should say, this is a timeline of Ruben because it ties in very well with the actual story of the game. It's, in fact, actually the whole story. So then Ruben, or Ruvik at this point, goes and sets up camp in a church. Now, this church... this is Leslie, by the way. This church is where you play chapters 6 and 7 of the game, I believe. And it's an old cult church that his dad used to be a part of. And at this church, he sets up another laboratory underneath its ruins where he has help from locals, or maybe not from locals, but uses the space to perform further surgeries and deranged experiments. Out of this comes Zen and Noon. If you watch my playthrough, these are two twins who you fight in a graveyard. They're actually a boss, but they were two twins separated at birth through Ruvik's experiments, and they were both given a similar growth serum, which caused them to end up like this. Something else is Sentinel emerges from this. Now, Sentinel is a guard dog at the church who feeds on corpses, but he also had an upbringing much the same way as Zen and Noon. So it's here that Ruvik really performs most of his experiments here primarily, and in his underground mansion below his mansion. At one point, again, he's in a fire and no one ever finds him again. So seemingly he died. Now here, his brain is taken. And actually what ends up happening is, in a cutscene, we find out that Marcelo Jimenez, being upset that he no longer is receiving funding, brings two men in suits in to kill Ruvik and take his brain. And with this brain, they start the project known as STEM, which allows for people to share a consciousness and share memories, which is in actuality the entire premise of the game. Sebastian, Kidman, and Joseph stumble in on this experiment and are knocked out and hooked up to this machine with a bunch of other people that are all connected to Ruvik's brain. Inside these memories of lakeside towns, of Crimson City, of the church, of the mansion, and of the underground subway systems, etc., you encounter these creatures. Now, here's some of them. There we go. The first Resident Evil-like chainsaw boss. A creature born from the mind of a murderer merged with Ruvik's madness. So these people, this is not the first time that they have been hooked up to Ruvik's consciousness, and many times there are residuals. This is another boss, Safehead. A creature created from a blend of Ruvik's final memories before he was dismembered, and his fury at having his research stolen from his safe. Anyone who approaches the safe is killed and their severed head added to those in the sack. Because Jimenez stole Ruvik's research and claimed it for his own. Trauma. A creature born from Ruvik's concept of death and rebirth based upon his rejection of the religion his father forced upon him from an early age. So my point with all this is, a lot of these creatures that you fight are actually manifestations of Ruvik's subconscious. They're not really zombies, and they're not even really individuals in their own right. I mean, largely what they are is memories and group consciousness that become merged into things and just are disgusting. Those are the bosses. Here you have the haunted. These are the normal afflicted, the normal type of individuals that you will fight in the game. So, human test subjects connected to STEM and turned into creatures by synchronizing with Ruvik's consciousness. So essentially what you have is a type of Inception experience where you become hooked up with Ruvik and his memories and others who have been connected to him previously and did not survive, and they're turned into the haunted. They cannot handle his memories. And he, in fact, I mean, there's no question about it. Ruvik was, in actuality, a serial killer. He was a deranged murderer. But those memories mixed with the consciousness of mental patients and the like create the haunted and the enemies that you fight. I've seen a lot of reviewers not really be able to understand this fairly basic concept. And they say, oh, I don't understand, what we're fighting. The plot just seems to jump around. It's really jumbled. It doesn't make any sense. And I can understand how that would be the case if you were very casually just playing the game through, almost in a mechanical way, how you would play a shooter through a story. I mean, we're so privileged nowadays in video games to where we have a plot just thrust in our face. We don't have to read these things that are unlocking after the game. We don't have to read the memos and the journals in-game that we find that are the collectibles. We kind of view them as extra, when in fact, for this game, they're really necessary to understand what's going on. So, that's Ruvik's story. On the other side of things, you have Sebastian. Let's go back and find this motherfucker. Now, Sebastian, you play as Sebastian. He's the main character. And he lost his daughter and his wife to a tragic accident some time ago. And so he drinks, he's kind of a hard ass now. but he's complemented well by Joseph, his partner, who helps him through his tough time. And together they make a really good team. And he being plugged in to Ruvik's subconscious as well, and Joseph starts to have ramifications, and they slowly start to turn into haunted themselves, which it seems to imply that the longer you're hooked up to this system, the more likely you are to turn into a haunted, because it's slowly throughout the game. At first, Joseph does not turn, and then eventually he does. At one point, I believe it's chapter 6 and 7. Kidman never turns, and Sebastian at one point turns as well. I'm not going to give away too much of it. So the other characters to go over that are important to the story is Nurse Tatiana, where she's the nurse in your room where you upgrade, and she seemingly just worked at Beacon Mental Hospital. She, I believe, is actually a fragment of Leslie's memory and has no relation to Joseph whatsoever. I felt like they could have done more with her. She was so prevalent in the game until she just suddenly wasn't anymore, but that's alright. Here you have Leslie. Now, Leslie is where the story gets interesting and really where the story gets set up for a sequel, because he, was actually receiving aid from Beacon Mental Institution, but he is the only one who's been previously hooked up to Ruvik and survived, which means that their brains are compatible. It was a full transference of data could occur, of memories, and Leslie was seemingly okay. Now, I mean, he was fucked up. He's a mental patient. But he was okay. He did not die. He did not become haunted. So after you get hooked up to the subconscious of Ruvik and you play through these levels in these familiar places like the church, the mansion, the lakeside town, Crimson City, you slowly are playing through the memories and the places of significance for Ruben/Ruvik. That's the point of it. You're playing through the important places in his life as they're inhabited by these haunted. And throughout the process, you're supposed to understand Ruvik's life story. And yes, I agree with most reviewers. It is jumbled. It is confusing. It is not chronological. But the point is, it's memory, right? You're not supposed to experience it in that way. When you think of things in your memory, they're all an amalgam, right? You can't pick something out as a finite point. It mixes with other things. It's inevitable that this happens. So I believe that's what they were trying to do with the story. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I think it was really well done. As far as the gameplay itself, I think it was probably one of the most rewarding third-person survival horror shooters I've ever played. I'll put it right up there with Dead Space as far as how it feels to kill when you shot a haunted, when you got a headshot and they just exploded all over the screen, or when you had a tense moment of crafting an arrow, or crafting a bolt, for the Agony crossbow, and finally, disarming a trap in time and being able to kill 4 enemies and, getting away with 2 slivers of health. It was a great feeling, and the scares were there, and they weren't jump scares, which is something I appreciated. This was psychological. You never knew what was happening in the game. You didn't know why you were anywhere, and nowhere was safe. The environment literally changed around you, just how a memory would jump from one situation to something that connects to it in some seemingly random way. I will say the scariest thing that you fight in this game, let me see if I can, it's gonna be down here. Yeah, so Laura, she dies in a fire. This is what she comes back as. How fucking disgusting is that? And she's so fast, she kills you in one hit. She can only be destroyed by fire, and a lot of it at that. A creature born from the memory of Laura's tragic death and Ruvik's own vengefulness. The thing is nearly immune to bullets, but reacts violently to open flame. Basically what I told you. Now, the last thing to really understand is, you progress through this game, and I'm intending this to be for people that have played the game or watched a playthrough of it, so I'm not going to really explain every single thing that happens. But once you get to the end of the game, and you realize that Sebastian realizes that he's hooked up to Ruvik, and he's killed, it's, it brings some things into question. Number one, Kidman tries to kill Leslie at one point in the game. Now, why would she do that? It's because, and this is my theory, he is the only one who is fully able to sync with Ruvik's consciousness. And she works for some other organization, some third-party organization that comes in to intervene in this process. And you're left wondering who they are, what they wanted, but you know that they were involved, and you know that she was not actually a detective, but worked for this agency. It's very conspiracy-like with like Umbrella and Resident Evil. And she tries to kill Leslie, and you stop her. But then at the very end of the game, you notice that Leslie walks away from the scene. And he doesn't walk all huddled over and weird like he normally does. He's very scared usually in the game. He walks away tall and proud, which makes you think that the whole thing was a way for Ruvik to transfer his memory, his brain, his consciousness over to Leslie. And now Leslie gets away and is actually Ruvik in a different body. That's what I think. And Julie Kidman working with Joseph and Sebastian. I believe that if there is a sequel, Sebastian will be working with Julie primarily and her organization in order to find and stop Ruvik. This game was really great on a lot of fronts. I think it required some thinking. It required quick triggers. It required good aim. It required some, discipline as far as managing your resources, and it felt like a Mikami game in the same way that a Tarantino film, and I think IGN did a really good job of explaining this, in the same way that a Tarantino film feels Tarantino-ish, right? It has these characteristic features, the dialogue, the characters, the set pieces, the camera angles. This game felt like a Mikami game. The settings, being near a lake, very Resident Evil 4-like, a lot of this game, actually. It almost feels like the spiritual successor and the sequel to Resident Evil 4 that Mikami never got to make. And he did a really great job of it. I guess that's the best way that I can describe it to you. If you haven't played Resident Evil 4, you should play this. And I guarantee you, if you have, and you haven't played this yet, you'd say, wow, these are really, really, really similar. A lot of the enemy types are similar. The upgrade system is in a very similar fashion. There's a currency in the form of gel instead of money, but there's still a currency. There's a way to upgrade your character. The way that the plot is paced and the way that your allies are sparse throughout most of it, but are interjected at just the right times to break up the tension, is very much the same way that other Resident Evil games have been. So overall, I would have to give this game a 9 out of 10. And it's so different. The last game that I really felt was as good as this was Wolfenstein: The New Order. And I just started playing Sunset Overdrive about an hour into it over the last couple days. And it feels like a great game as well, but completely different. If you're looking for a good survival horror game, and you're looking for a new experience with Mikami that feels like the old school Resident Evil, but isn't, this is the game for you. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of... Oh, here he is. Here's the scarred Ruvik. I really hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown and discussion of the plot and the story and my, overall judgment about this game. I had a great time making this series for you. Thanks again for tuning in. It's been your boy Flagcap.